Hi, my name is Mike Thomas, President of Kiwi Indian Motorcycle Company. What we're going to show you here is how to correctly time the oil pump to the engine. So it's not just a matter of putting the oil pump on the engine and where it ends up is where it ends up. It has to be timed in order to get the distributor in its correct location, and it's mostly the nipples for the coil and high tension, well, the high tension leads. Otherwise they will interfere with the shift rod. So this one here we're going to do it on is a 1948 to 53 model, which has a aluminum oil pump. There'll be a little bit of bonus here where I'll show how the check ball and spring is fitted. This is an example of a oil pump that has not been correctly timed to the engine. You'll actually see at the fully advanced position the distributor cap nipple runs into the shifter rod. So it's very important to have the oil pump correctly timed to the engine. First off, we want to get the front cylinder up on compression, so put your finger over the front cylinder spark plug hole and then kick the motor over until you can feel it trying to lift your finger off the seat, and that's coming up on compression on the front cylinder. Next step is to get the timing mark in the right position in the hole. So now you've got your front cylinder coming up on compression, you need to get the timing mark in the hole. What I've found is 74s, you get the timing mark in the middle of the hole, and 80s and 84-inch engines seem to be right at the very front end of the hole. They seem to work best there. We work very closely with James Gaskets for developing gaskets that are specifically for Indian motorcycles. This is a foamet material, and it's actually got metal in between with 2 layers of foamet material on each side. What this allows, what actually happens with this type of material is it will conform to irregular surfaces. So even though this is new material, new surfaces we're putting it on, if it's original surfaces over 70 years or so, they've been warped and people had they got slight scratches on, some a little bit deeper than others through using screwdrivers, which shouldn't be done, but you know, over 70 years people have done different things that we got to deal with. This here is actually an old one. You can actually see it actually leaves an impression in there, so imagine if you got some defects in the surface, this foamet material will take that up, which is certainly a big plus for us working with these old bikes. Down in this hole here is a check ball and spring. The ball goes in first and the check ball follows that. One of the things in the aluminum pump, these things are notorious for bleeding the oil from the tank down into the crankcase over a period of time. It's inevitable that it's going to happen to some extent. Sometimes it happens way faster than what it should, but it's generally to do with this ball not seating down here on its seat within the oil pump. A little trick to do with aluminum oil pumps is this is about the size of the stock spring. There's some on the market that are actually way weaker than what they should be. There's actually a lot of people have fitted them in the bike, but they're actually running into oil bleeding problems. What I do is the other one's just weaker, period. This particular spring I start out with and I expand it to 1.25 inches long. So we're going from approximately 1 inch, and I just expand that, just pull it apart to 1.25 inches, and that seems to put about the right tension on the ball and pretty pretty well eliminates or greatly reduces the amount of bleed by in this little check ball. So to seat it, just pop it down its hole. You can get a piece of soft material. Aluminum is fine. Actually, this one here, get the oil out so you can actually see it a little bit better. But I actually made a little radius, if I can focus on it. It's actually got a radius in the end, and the ball seats into that. I can then put it down this hole and put the oil pump on a good solid surface and give it a good solid tap. Don't pussy around with it. It's a job, just needs one good solid whack, and the ball will seat. If you've got a fresh ball, go ahead and put that in after you whack. But the aluminum, if you made a nice little radius seat in it, certainly stress out the load over the whole ball. Another way to possibly do your gasket and oil pump installation and to make sure that the check ball spring doesn't get cockeyed is to put a couple of screws through and then drop the gasket down over it and holding it in position. But what you would have done firsthand is already made sure that you've timed the oil pump to the engine. So you're going to pull it off and then just do what I did here. That's another alternative way. While at it, always look around the area you're working. So you're doing a visual of anything else that's could be related to creating a problem. Down here is the pinion shaft seal. So what happens is this is where the oil is transferred from the oil pump through this area here, and on the end here is the pinion. This is the pinion shaft, and oil is transferred into the crank pin. And any bleed by in here actually reduces the amount of flow going to the crank pin. Now Indian had this, well, it's about as good as it was in that era. You can see they had this felt and then had a felt retainer. And felt is nothing more than bleeding oil through. So what I come out with around 20 years ago, actually the best thing to do with that, there you go, that fixes that. And I created this seal, just a purpose-built seal. It's got double lips on it. It's Viton, so it withstands all the acids and temperature within the oils and engine. And so just pull the other one out and then replace it with this one here. The open side of the seal faces out, so it's just going to go down and fit in there like so. So that's a nice upgrade while you're at it. Take the foamet gasket, just fit it on, and always put some grease on the bevel gear here. One thing I've found with reproduction oil pumps that are on the market, and some originals, but the reproductions are very bad, is this area around here is not enough material. And some of them have got porosity in this area. And what happens is you're putting a brand new oil pump on your Indian, and oil is actually bleeding by in this area here. So what I do with most oil pumps is I fill it up with build it up with a very high-end aluminum epoxy, and then resurface this whole gasket surface. But that's really important. I don't know how many oil pumps we've tested. Guys that had oiling problems, seized up motors, and we tell them to send the whole package in, and lo and behold, that's where the problem is. And they put on a brand new oil pump thinking, hey, you know what, it's good. So Just put grease on the gear. Put your gasket on, it's just going to sit there. Check ball is already in there. Put the expanded spring in there. Now the trick is here is to put this oil pump on and hold that gasket steady, because what can happen is if it slips down, it's going to cock that spring, and if you don't pay attention, you'll put your motor together with a spring that's been jammed, and as you can see, it's ruined the end of it, which messes up your tension. I'm Mike Thomas, president of Kiwi Indian Motorcycle Company. Here is a brand new reproduction oil pump that I want to make people aware of. I've actually talked to the manufacturer of this, and he doesn't seem to want to do anything about it. But this oil pump, it's a 48 to 53. It's an aluminum oil pump, and it has a fatal flaw. And what it is, it's down here where the oil transfer goes through. You actually see here, it actually has very little surface area, and if you get really close, you can actually see there's some porosity going across that gasket surface. And this pump here will leak oil, and you will not get your pressure or feed into the engine. So this here will lead to an engine failure. Beware of these. The only fix for this is actually build up that whole area with a high-end 2-part epoxy and then resurface it. But this pump will take out your engine. Now that we've got the check ball and spring in place and the gasket in place, we need to make sure, once again, this is for 48 to 53, the aluminum pump, that this slot here, this dog, is in line with that slot on the end of the camshaft. So that's part of the thing we've got to do. The other thing is we have to time the oil pump to the engine. That's very critical. So just to give you an approximate start point is, you see where that distributor drive dog is, about that angle. It's going on, there's a helical gear in here, and it's a helical gear here. So what happens is, as you're putting this on, it's actually rotating. So by the time where everything's said and done, we're going to be about where my line is there, and that's pointing to the front cylinder intake valve. So the book calls out it for being perpendicular, but this is incorrect. Make sure it's just a little bit off, that it's pointing towards the front cylinder intake valve. Now the next trick is actually putting this whole assembly on and not allowing that spring to drop down, and that drive dog has to engage. These oil pump screws need to have sealant on them. I actually go a step further and I put a little fiber washer, hard fiber washer, as you can see, under the heads. And this is a product, Loctite 567. It's a pasty Teflon, and it does an awesome job of sealing. So apply plenty of it, don't be scared, on the end of the threads, and away you go. The one that you need to really douche a lot of is this bottom one, the short screw. It's at the bottom of the pump. These are notorious for getting air bleeds and it's really important because this is where the flow of oil is going from the oil pump to the engine. And I don't know how many oil pumps we've tested over the years that this is a real critical area. Now, with using James gaskets, whether it be for the aluminum pump or the cast iron pump, we've flooded, especially the cast iron one, we've also gone to a foamet on that. Before that it was silicone. We flooded it with a silicone bead around the hole. But if you're using just standard gaskets that everybody sells, it's just cut from one size fits all, they're notorious for bleeding oil off at this point, or bleeding air into the system, and air getting into here breaks down the oil, so it's going straight from the oil pump to the bottom end, and we want to get the maximum flow there. So this one here, always douche it with a whole bunch of sealant on here. It's the only one that can give you a problem, so don't be scared to give it plenty. And this one here goes all the way down under. Once the pump is installed, what we're looking at is that slot pointing towards the front cylinder intake valve. So if we're looking down the hole here, you can see in there. Now the book's going to call out for it being perpendicular this way, in line with the engine that way. But do not do that. It has to be indexed off ever so slightly towards the front intake valve. What this does, it allows it puts the high tension terminals and the distributor cap in the correct alignment. The screws that go into the oil pump are Philister head screws, and are slotted. Always use a screwdriver with a nice clean sharp surface along here at the end. It makes a big difference. There's nothing worse than seeing screws that guys have screwed them in, and these things, the screwdriver's easy, they put a little bit of force on it, they want to slide out, and it burrs the end of the slot. You're always looking to, our motorcycles are expensive, you always want to pay attention to those small little details, and there's nothing worse than looking at a bike and the slots are rounded out just because somebody's used an old screwdriver, a cheap ass screwdriver.